Hey folks, this is Walker, one of the hosts of Idio Talk, a Radiohead podcast. Just wanted to drop a note up front that this week is part 2 of our discussion about the King of Limbs. Last week, Zach and I went into the album's background, its release, our own personal histories with it, and this week we jump right into the album tracks, go through all of those as well as some of the B-sides, live takes, etc. Just make sure if you missed last week's episode, you go back and give that a listen, as it really informs the discussion we have today. And without further ado, enjoy the podcast.
So what do you say we get into this album?
Yeah, I do just, I would love to. I do just want to add one thing going back to kind of, cheeky titles or song names or album names that don't resonate with us. I remember when we had Kailani on, she talked about that the Hill of the Thief artwork originally was Don would propose phallic topiaries.
Yes.
And then York vetoed it. What if they took a total left turn into Weezer territory or something and they called this album Drain the Main Vein or something like
Cowabunga, dude.
Yeah,
that would annoy me a lot more than I hope I was clear. I'm not mad at the title.
No, totally.
It's just not my favorite Radiohead tendency.
Yeah.
That's all.
I just love that they have never not taken themselves seriously, essentially.
Yes.
They seem very earnest and confident in their titling.
That's very true. And I think you raise a good point. I do think I would rather them err on the side of the bony king of nowhere than we're a joke band.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So are we going to get into the album?
Absolutely.
Let's get into this crazy King of Limbs. The opening track is one. Now, actually, this is something I wanted to say. For years, I would say for the last decade, I thought that the opening track to this album was Little by Little.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
And Little by Little is one of the songs that made an impression on me when the album was new.
Absolutely.
And I had, in my mind, made it the opener. But the opener is not that. It's something different. We'll talk about it. We'll let it play for a moment. Let's get into it. Here is the King of Limbs. So all this is sampled, which you would not think.
You really hear them going back to sort of the creep kind of grunge.
Yeah.
Oh, whoa.
In the back of an El Camino, was scared. No one knew in my name.
God,
Catch my own
dude.
house party because nobody came.
Gosh, talk about, though, I think I mentioned at the very end of our Kid A episode that even though Kid A sounds like the future and nothing since before or after, and I invoked Linkin Park, which I think absolutely drew upon, Kid A, just as Radiohead were drawing upon Aphex Twin and so forth. But the results are not, anywhere near as good. Part of me does wonder, was Radiohead embracing the fact that rock guitar music seemed to be kind of on its way out in the 90s and made the best version of that with OK Computer and Kid A, kind of incorporating new technologies? Or did they sort of influence such shittier versions, lesser than that? But how this is sort of talky, rappy.
Sure.
Not that Radiohead guides influence or anything like that of every single band, but it's just so interesting to think
I don't
about.
think that Sum 41 has ever heard Radiohead. Right now, this goes out to all our Canadian listeners. This is your number one export, Canada.
I wonder if they listen to Blink. 182.
Should we get to the? I mean, since
Yes.
we made it this far, we should get to the. I remember.
Don't count on me.
What? Now, okay, here comes the big part.
Give a
Shit about nothing.
Oh, that effect.
The telephone
Yeah, I
effect.
hate it. the hook.
Telephone book.
Proportion. The doctor said my mom should have had an abortion. Just like we were talking about earlier, abortions.
Yeah, it all comes
Thematic.
back around. And phone books.
Let's abort that song.
Yeah, it's not good. You know what's funny is I remember being disappointed when I got this album because I loved this song. I don't know how you felt about it, but
I enjoyed it. Yeah.
I really
2001.
2001, and I very much related to the sentiment of, not wanting to become a casualty of society, a victim of conformity.
Yeah. Lifestyles of the rich and the famous.
Yeah, exactly. While just actively conforming to every trend I could possibly gain access to. I remember, I won't name the names here, but you'll know who I'm talking about. There was an argument about this song in the band I was in. We were like a pop punk band too.
Oh, okay. Uh-huh.
And there were brothers in my band, and they would, like brothers do. All of us actually would kind of viciously fight with each other. Like,
yeah.
We were like those friends who'd like known each other too long to like have that basic level of decorum.
Walker's online diary during this era is pornographically violent.
It's like, I hate my friends. But yeah, we would all fight, but these two brothers would fight especially.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember the brother, the younger, was...
It was not Walker and I, by the way. We were not the brothers.
No.
I was not in the band.
No, but we've talked about how Radiohead are the exception to what I think is a general rule that brothers should probably not be in bands together.
Totally.
And these two, I would say, did not disprove that rule. But the younger brother was like singing this song and talking about how it was like his favorite song at the time. And his older brother just goes, "You're like the biggest conformist I know," which is such a like deep level insult to say to
Oh
somebody.
my God, that's funny.
It's like calling somebody a loser. Or something where you're just like, wow, it's really mean and deep.
Yeah.
The way only family can insult each other, where it's just like, I am criticizing the fiber of your being.
Yeah. I mean, my version of that was when I was playing the Beatles song "I'm a Loser" on my acoustic guitar, and my entire family nodded in agreement.
Yeah.
As I was playing it.
Yeah, and you were like, boy, do I sure love this song because I don't relate to it in any way. And we're like, but you're a total loser. We hate you. It reminds me of we might cut this because this is just me quoting a movie now. Not that we don't do that a lot, but in the scene in Rushmore when Bill Murray gets into the car with his kids, and he's like, "Why don't you invite Max to your party?" "What? Shut up, Dad. There's going to be girls there. Pull your head out of your ass." All right. So, King of Limbs, first song on this album is called Bloom, and it goes a little something like this. Feel like you hear the sampling right away. It's a piano,
Absolutely.
but you also can hear that it's a little chopped and screwed.
Yeah, and what's cool is it doesn't just replay that loop. You could see the piano track gets stretched out and then sped up. So there's not a lot.
And it's already become condensed from what it was going doo-doo-doo,
Yep.
doo-doo-doo, and now it's just doo-doo-doo, 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 doo-doo-doo.
So what's so cool about this is until the voice is going to enter, but your ear, and by the way, that ba-ba, I get major In Limbo vibes. If not,
okay.
even a little bit. I would just say In Limbo, actually. But what's so cool is there's not a melody, right? So when York's voice comes in, it's kind of difficult to know. You just think about being the singer and writing this song. You have to really, really have trust on where you're going to project and land.
Mm-hmm. Let the vocals play for a little bit. Now, for it being such kind of electronica arrangement in this song, his vocal is very like unaffected. It's a pretty straight vocal track.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think that
His voice is really doing the talking here. Now,
yeah, I just love it. No, I'm sorry. I was just letting it breathe, but think what you just said is such a good observation there. And this, we'll kind of talk about this as the album goes through, because I think this album isn't backloaded. I've never thought of what the opposite of a front-loaded album is. What would you say? The best
Backloaded.
songs? Yeah, it's not backloaded, but if I could, it's not tipping my hand. I think that this album may seem like the best songs are on the second half, but I think more what it is that the album builds into that second half.
Okay.
So we'll just kind of leave it there, but I think that, and Brad talks about this in his book, and I've really thought about it a lot, is that in albums such as Kid A and this album, Radiohead don't push unique song forms as much when they use a deviation in traditional instrumentation.
Mm-hmm.
So not every song on Kid A has a chorus, and not every song on this album has a chorus. But if you kind of, especially the two songs following this one, they are very structurally traditional in terms of verse-chorus or verse-chorus-bridge, verse-chorus, which is really, really a wise choice, right? Because it would be too bombastic, not necessarily, but it would be a lot for your ears and mind to handle if the songs were structurally unique, such as they are on Hail to the Thief and on In Rainbows.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think that's really interesting. I do want to point out, while the song is still playing, even though it's not related to what you just said, I think that you really hear their avant-garde kind of jazz influence here with the drum track that's happening, because this is, a 4 count. You can tap along to it, but it's very, very strange, and it's very strange to have it looped the whole time. This reminds me a lot of some of the songs on Bitches Brew, where you have like a simple time signature going, but what the drums are doing is so out or off that it creates a much stranger effect,
Yeah. Well, and I think In Limbo is a great example of that. I remember when we were listening to it.
Yeah, you blew my mind with that
That's
beat.
in a 4 count. Yeah, and that's, I would just say that, God, what is the second single from Amnesiac? Why can't I remember?
Is it Knives Out?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Knives Out, I feel like, although totally different song than In Limbo, the downward motion of the guitar and the way the instruments are playing at odds with one another in a way, it really does, and I mentioned the noise, the sort of reminds me a lot of In Limbo. It's similarly there, where it's, like you said, it's a 4 count, but I think to discern that is very difficult with what the drums are doing and the way York is singing against it with these very elongated statements. And talking about the statements, just open your mouth. It's very, very Tom York, Radiohead kind of lyrical opener, I think. Love this.
That's Bloom. It's fading out right now.
It's street spiriting.
Now, you said this album isn't backloaded. I think this opener represents a very important shift in the Radiohead catalog. A catchphrase of mine, or something of a catchphrase of mine, has become, damn, do these motherfuckers know how to open an album?
Yeah.
I think with Bloom, what we have here is the end of a 7-album streak of knowing how to open an album.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
I'm not saying whether or not this album is backloaded, but I am saying, having every time I've listened to this album over the last several weeks, listened to it all the way through, this one has not grown on me. There are songs on the album that have grown on me. I really don't like that song.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, I mean, I don't think that it's as strong as 15 Step or 2 + 2 = 5 or Everything in Its Right Place. Probably my 3 favorites, right?
Sure.
Airbag, maybe being tied in there. I got them all tied for one, except for, but I'm saying, but it's not as strong, but I really do like the tone. And like I was saying before, I think that this album is one, for me, again, that is meant to be actively listened to. And I think that what I mean by that is in sequence and sort of as an experience. And I think that these first 3 tracks, if not even the first 4, really take you on a journey. And we'll get into that journey as the next track starts. But I do just kind of, I maybe have the most notes on this song. So don't worry, listeners, it's not going to be this long. But I I guess my summary of it is that a couple things are really striking about this song that I'd like to highlight. So Radiohead are listening to and aware of dubstep, right? And similarly to Kid A, they're listening to a lot of contemporary electronica music, but they're running electronic music style through more analog instrumentation, whether that's the Owens Martineau, whether it's the right, and they're doing something very similar here. This does not sound like dubstep, which, by the way, in 2011, dubstep was blowing up massively,
right?
And this is really, really cool in these first 3 tracks. They're pushing and emphasizing what is typically thought of as monophonic instrumentation, piano loops, and building a melody around that, which I think is really, really, really cool. And it's not necessarily a foreign method, as this is how Nigel got them going in Rainbows in 2006. Like I said, not exactly like this, but the rhythm tracks, and the form isn't conventional like strophic or verse chorus form, but it's not as section changey as like a 2 + 2 = 5, which again just speaks to the salience that you don't want to have something that is so unconventional in its form and is like a drum piano loop based song with York singing over it. And I mean, this is I read this really wonderful article that I could not find the author of, unfortunately. But it's from a blog called, I'm so sorry, Sick Mouthy. And it's just this really amazing essay on the guy essentially thinks that the term influenced by is useless and that we should say sounds like, even though sounds like is a massively subjective term depending on your own experience and what you can draw, but still. And I really agree with that because this is now my own notes, but I think this is like, is this possibly the first math metal progressive jazz Radiohead song? And I said metal, right? And you're like, what are you talking about? But if you think about what the drums are doing, it almost sounds like, really, really, really heavy metal. I'm talking when it's like an atonal, like da 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 da. And if you took York's vocals and instead of a melodic and you hear it just a pure screaming voice, they're usually shorter statements stretched out because you don't want that much variance in your throat. So I'm not saying that Radiohead, that they took a metal jazz fusion, but jazz fusion is usually what influences metal bands. Kirk Hammett. And I really hear it a lot on that song. But they might take something that Radiohead would never do, like tune down a full step or something like that and hitting your guitar like that. But I really do think the drums are evocative of that. And yeah, and I don't know. I mean, that might be, but that's where I love this. They're not influenced by metal. Maybe they are, but I doubt any of them listen to death metal. But I think if you take influenced by and change it to sounds like, then it's okay because listeners can think I sound like an idiot, but it sounds like is so much more subjective. Do you kind of get what I'm saying?
Yeah, you don't sound like an idiot at all. I think that's all very salient. And I think that for me, this song represents some really interesting ideas and interesting influences or sounds that they're playing with. I just think that it doesn't sound done to me.
Sure.
And building a song around that, to me is just, I hate to use a word that is so emphatic and like I don't want to sound like a brat or anything, but it's just really boring to me.
Okay.
And the lack of melody is pretty boring. And I think like the drum idea is interesting. I think the loops are interesting, but I just don't think it builds into anything that's that enjoyable to listen to. And this is something where if you played me this and said this is like a B-side of stuff they were working on, or this became the way kind of like Pulled Apart by Horses became Reckoner. I'm interested in like them building off of this, but I do not for the life of me understand why they opened the album with it.
Okay.
Now, I do have kind of more to say about what this song represents for me in terms of what my kind of quibbles with this record are, but I would rather talk about those in the same breath with what I love about it.
Sure.
And so I think that maybe we'll just talk about that a little more generally once we get through the album.
Absolutely. And we can go on to the next song. I just love that the opener is Bloom and the next song begins with the word morning. I think that the The way the narrative of this album is crafted in terms of its song titling is really, really intentional. And Bloom, Awakening, whatever.
Sure.
And I think that if you're to kind of think about it in terms of the instrumentation of the next songs, which I'll just say, I think what they do is that they ease you into more sounds that you're familiar with. And I just love that so much. And that's why I love it as an opener. I'm not saying that I think I do enjoy the song maybe a bit more than you do, but that it's so great or it's, so melodic. But I think that that's the journey it takes you on. And I think opening with a song such as this is really smart rather than opening with, say, Little by Little or something like that.
Fair enough. I think that, though, I know that sometimes Radiohead likes to challenge us with their openings, but I don't think that this is I don't think that this is a particularly challenging album. I don't think that it's trying to be that and failing. I think that as we get into it, we've used the word chill to kind of describe the mode that they're in a little bit here. And so I think that it's kind of needlessly obtuse for them to put this song at the top. Now, the next one you talked about, Morning Mr. Magpie, let's see how we feel about this one.
Please.
So we're hearing what is I'm sure there were guitars in that last song, but what is recognizably a guitar.
Oh, yeah.
Now, Zach, I have a little thing about this song.
Hit me.
This is a very Johnny Greenwood part, but it's a very Johnny Greenwood of now part. This percussive playing is very much kind of what a lot of the songs on The Smile are built around.
I 100% agree with you.
So it's kind of interesting to hear this on Radiohead from, 12 years ago? Because...
yes, dude, 12 years ago.
This isn't super typical of the sound in Radiohead that he goes for.
Not at all. I mean, this song is so exciting to me because the percussion is still driving the song. And like you were just saying, even the guitar has a muted quality, right? So it's more percussive playing on an electric. I definitely hear a palm mute of sorts. And so the guitar is a muted quality, but the bass sounds natural, right? And that's just so cool to me. And the form of the song is very straightforward, given the lack of normality in the timing and the mix, right? And it's more normal than the opener, but this is still a very understated song with the percussion is still front and center.
Well, and let's listen to a second just to that percussion in the guitar, because I think you really hear the kind of unnatural effect of the looping. Right? Do you see what I mean? You can hear that these are real acoustic or analog sounds, but you can also hear that they've been rendered and built into something digitally. This part...
Can we turn it up?
National anthem.
Sounds like. Oh my God.
Do you get that?
Absolutely.
It sounds like a very similar melody to that first horn break in the national anthem.
This is so tight.
Really like what Colin's doing here.
Absolutely.
This one, for me, Zach, is one of the aforementioned growers. And it's been a very kind of last-minute grower. I listened to this album on the drive up here again, and kind of right up until today, I was pretty take or leave Mr. Magpie. Kind of leaning towards leave.
Oh, okay, wow.
And then I was listening to it today and completely... unselfconsciously, without any premeditation, I found myself singing along to it, and that stood out to me. I was like, "Oh, I must enjoy Morning Mr. Magpie," and
I'm a Radiohead fan. I must enjoy.
Yes, I must. It is compulsory. Yeah, no, it was like, oh, I guess it turns out that I do kind of like this song. Now, this is another one. I don't mean to keep holding back, like what I say at the end is going to be so interesting. This is another one where I kind of, my overall feelings about this album can be exemplified in what I think could have been done differently with this song. But I do like Mr. Magpie. How do you feel about it?
I mean, I said the song's so exciting, so I think it's pretty obvious I like it. I do just want to point out and harken back to my point that I think that like the first song, dubstep is really peaking at this time. And they're translated through instruments. And then I also talked about a possible like metal type sound, but through a much different melodic quality. The bridge of this song where everything cuts and that you have that really bassy kind of string section. Yes, so the singing is very Radiohead and very national anthem-y, but the way everything cuts into kind of a new riff that's it reminds me, close your eyes and imagine Kurt Hammett on stage and think of like Master of Puppets or Fade to Black. And specifically speaking to early Metallica, where they'll have these really metal songs, but then it'll cut, and a lot of bands do this, but and it'll cut and it'll be dramatic, but kind of a solo harmony. That's what it reminds me of. And again, this goes to the difference between influence and sounds like, right? So I do not think Radiohead are influenced by metal or Metallica, but I do think that it sounds like that, the way everything breaks and it's kind of a new section. And that's all. I mean, it's just really, really fun to do because I do think Radiohead are exploring ways just like they did on Kid A and Amnesiac and all of their albums, of course. But it's very intentional in this album of taking other styles of music and translating it. Again, that's all.
I like the part of the song that you're highlighting because to me, this is an example of why this one is much more well executed version of the particular experimentation that they're going for on this album than Bloom is. Whereas Bloom, to me, it's just building the whole song around this drum loop, which is a really interesting, cool drum loop, and this atonal sound that I don't think is particularly interesting. That one is kind of slipping into the flights of fancy into electronic music, more reminiscent of Hail to the Thief for me, that are less interesting because they're repetitive. And if I'm not particularly taken by the sound that they're building everything off of, the song gets a little boring to me.
Like Backdrifts or something.
Like Backdrifts, but Mr. Magpie has what makes their electronic songs on Kid A and Amnesiac so interesting and successful is the arrangement. There's a ton of precision in the arrangement. There's a lot of stuff being dropped in and out, and it's changing to new sections in this way that is so subtle that it kind of sneaks up on you.
Yeah.
And one thing that Radiohead are so brilliant at, Zach and I, maybe on pod, but I know off pod, we've talked about how section change and key change is sometimes something that bands or musicians, they force into a song, and it doesn't necessarily work for me if you just jam a key change or a new part. Radiohead is able to do it without you knowing they did it. And I really love that. And I think Mr. Magpie, as it gets into that kind of, it goes from this bouncy kind of groovy feel to this dark and ominous feel, and it does it in a way that it doesn't disrupt the flow of the song in any way.
Yes.
They really sneak into it in a really nice way.
And that's where I think what you just said, like if you picture that riff, you could hear it in a metal. I mean, just because of the repetitive downward motion, if you imagine it like that, and then it cutting everything into this doon dun 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 dun, I could hear it as a metal guitar driven song so much. And I'm not going to say this about every single song, listeners. But I just love that so much. And I think to your point of where sometimes it'll feel like they jam a key change, and sometimes metal songs strike me that way a little bit too, where they have to cut everything for this dramatic melodic break. But in that song, because everything starts off a little bit more muted, I think it really, really works.
I totally do. And I also, the word muted has come up and the word quiet has come up. So far, and one thing I really like about Morning Mr. Magpie is it is this like really busy riff.
Yeah.
Busier than like we said, I would say most Radiohead riffs that sounds a lot more like the seeds of how Johnny's playing is kind of developed in The Smile.
Yeah.
And I love that they're taking this really busy thing, but it's really quiet.
Yeah.
It's really restrained. Nothing ever really gets above like a middle volume.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I find very, very interesting about this record in general. We'll see if they stick with it. But so far, I feel like the two things we've been presented with are like, this is Radiohead in a quieter mode.
Yeah.
Last thing I'll say, it's a minor quibble, kind of fanfic on my part. I kind of wish this was a Smile song. I kind of wish that this was something that they kept around and developed and turned into a slightly more rock and roll arrangement as The Smile. The Smile is, in my opinion, they do a lot to kind of beef up their arrangements to compensate for the fact that it's a 3-piece and not a 5-piece.
Sure.
And I kind of think that kind of arrangement might serve this song a little better.
Yeah.
I like that it's quiet because I like that I mean, I'm contradicting myself. I really like that they're doing something restrained on this album. I think that's cool, but I think that this particular song might be served better with a little more of an open arrangement.
Yeah, and I pulled up my phone rudely just because I can't recall the opening track of the Smiles album, Light for Attracting Attention. It's the same. Mm-hmm. I've gotten that vibe, not until you just said so, but with that song, the way it's just sort of a chromatic opener. You know, I don't know the chords to it, but it sounds very chromatic to me. You know, half step, half step, half step. We are all the same, please. But it's a little bit more, it has a little bit more oomph than like songs on this album do, but I could totally see melodically it's slotting in on this album or being maybe written in this time.
Sure.
Is all. But I like that call, and I hadn't thought of that, the way Johnny Greenwood seems to touch the guitar in a much less forceful manner now than he did when, say, you know, during the Benz era or whatever. It really is evocative of The Smile. And probably because after in Rainbows, in watching live footage of them, he seems to be in a lot of other places besides just playing the guitar. Whereas when we saw them play with The Smile, he did have the bass, but he was primarily on stringed instruments.
Yes.
Which is really cool.
And this is the most percussive guitar playing I've heard in any Radiohead song so far. And I would say that percussive style is very prominent in The Smile.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So it's just cool. It's cool that when we get to their next album, too, there's a couple particular Johnny Greenwood sort of like almost like guitar dialects that appear on that album that I'm like, oh, and then that's a thing he like built a whole song around on The Smile.
Yeah.
So, you know, as much as we said this album is not a reinvention, like none of these guys are resting on their laurels and doing the same thing every album. And I love that.
Well, Ed is resting on his laurels every album.
Yes, but he's doing it in a new way.
I'm joking.
But yeah, I love that Johnny Greenwood he's still finding new ways to play the guitar at this point in their career. And that's something that's
still
awesome.
finding new ways to use his tools.
There we go. The next song, the one that I falsely thought was the opening of this album, is Little by Little. Listen to this percussion track. That clattering sound to me, it sounds like somebody playing the spoons.
Well, you know, Walker, I loved your analysis on what Johnny Greenwood's score reminds you of, and There Will Be Blood on our episode with Casey Pegram, how you said it reminded you of what you imagine is going on in Daniel Plainview's head. Mm-hmm. I think that you really hear you know, it's hard because I don't know who did what, and especially since this is loop-driven, but just that sense of anxiety that this provides, a building, and it reminded me a lot of the way you described Johnny Greenwood's score. And I will say this song has always been a go-to for me since 2011. When exercising, it's so good to run to at the midpoint, which we haven't gotten there yet, but midpoint of a run is what I meant actually, because of the tension build and then the like release flow. So this is like builds and then it releases, and I love that. And we have a chorus.
And once again, the arrangement is so cool and careful because the chorus stuff is dropping out. They're going down for the chorus, right?
Yeah.
And then let's listen to after this chorus because this is one of my favorite moments of production and arrangement on the album. So we'll just let it breathe for a second. So we lost that clattering spoon sound. And now we have a new hi-hat rhythm. And then what comes back in? Slowly fading in.
I'm going crazy. But in a, that guitar too, it sounds like an upstroke, Gilmorian upstroke from 1 to 6 instead of 6 to 1. Oh, it's so smart.
Now this song reminds me a lot in an extremely positive way of Packed Like Sardines, because what we have is a really kind of persistent groove.
Yes.
These sound like they could all be played on power chords. And what makes it so interesting is the things being dropped in and dropped out, and it gives this really kind of repetitive song a great deal of dynamics.
Yeah.
And I just love that so much that for the little by little, everything goes so much quieter, and then you slowly feel that spoon sound creeping back in. It's just really exciting and awesome, and I think that I remembered this song as the opener because my first TKOLHT is that this should be the opener of the album.
I can dig that. I mean, man, I just love your Amnesiac comparisons because we talked a lot about how in Packed Like Sardines, how it's pots and pans, like a pot that you would boil water in.
Yes.
Not as loop-driven. Phil Selway did come up with that. And the way things drop out in the chorus is very much I Might Be Wrong to Me. It's just in the mixing, right? It's a totally separate song. And I just love the restraint of the guitar. I mean, there's a lot. It almost sounds like it could be a nylon to me, but I'm not sure. But yeah, it's a really, really fun melodic, and then I just every single instrument sounds like it's being played like a person, even though I'm sure on the percussion track some of it isn't, and it's very restrained. And at this point in the album, it's abundantly clear to me that 2 live drummers are needed to play this song, would be needed to play the song live.
Oh yeah, we haven't mentioned that.
Yeah,
yet.
so
Why
Clive
don't you
Dreamer, longtime drummer of the band Portishead, and has played drums on several of Robert Plant's solo albums. Friend of the show, host of OK Podcast, Sean Perrin, did interview him on his show recently. It was a terrific interview, and he seems like such a amicable, nice person, and of course, but just to be at the level he was, it was just very, very cool. And I will say, watching some of the live footage of them in 2011 is exhilarating. It is so cool.
Well, have you watched the From a Basement performance of this album?
Yes.
We're going to play a few of those tracks afterwards here just to kind of compare, some of the ways that these songs were replicated with the band. And it's really interesting, I think, to compare because the process of recording this album, well, not just recording, but also its conception were so digital. I don't know why I said that. Digital.
I know.
So digital. Yeah. I don't know. I'm sorry. I glitched out for a second, listeners. I became digital. Zach was asking me if I knew what a tortoise was, and I didn't know. And then he knew I was a replicant.
A wasp lands on your arm and stings you. What do you do?
Did Radiohead play King of Limbs on analog or digital instruments? It's a trick question. Those digital renderings of their analog instruments. Now,
is this test to find out if I'm a Radiohead fan or a lesbian, Mr. Walker?
Yeah, people are like, "Wow, this cut of Blade Runner sucks." What? This is incomprehensible. Okay, I love that song. I'm using the word love. Love relative to how much I love Radiohead and their other songs. I think that's a great, great song. I think it's really meticulously arranged. It sounds awesome. It's the best utilization we've heard so far of this kind of middle approach that they're doing of looping their instruments and sampling themselves. And I also just want to point out, still very, very quiet, very busy. There's a ton going on just percussively, but you can also, I think you can hear all 4 of the string players in that song.
Yeah.
Too. It's a really lush arrangement, but it's not big. It's slight. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to, at this point in the album, get a feel for what they're kind of doing sonically, and I like it.
That's why I love Bloom, Walker, is
Sure.
because Bloom starts off kind of, I think your objections are really strong.
Sure.
But it blooms into Morning Mr. Magpie, which I think you just said that you like more, right? A little bit more traditional instrumentation, a little more melodic. Well, look at where you're at little by little. Little by little, they've given you a little bit more traditional instrumentation, right? You have what sounds like a nylon string guitar, maybe with a little bit of like a Latin flavor to it or something
Sure.
like that. You have a chorus. That song is staunchly verse chorus. There's no weird bridge that breaks everything. And I just want to say now, because there's a few songs coming up that I think Radiohead, I've been talking about how I think I should use sounds like, and I have throughout the whole course of this podcast. So when reading that article, I was like, thank Christ. But no, I think this album and Radiohead overall and Tom York big time. You pointed this out in our Hail the Thief episode. Is influenced by and sounds like Peter Gabriel so much.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, just like, but there's a particular song off Peter Gabriel's 2002 album, Up. The song "Growing Up."
Okay.
This song melodically really, really matches it, and it's really, really, really interesting.
The one we just heard, or one coming up?
Little by little.
Okay.
Yeah, and the other thing that I was thinking about with like a Peter Gabriel, kind of Tom York possible influencer sounds like, is we talked about how Wolf at the Door and Jigsaw, how we hear Tom doing a low harmony with himself.
Yeah.
Very, very kind of a Peter Gabriel thing to do. And
Sure.
I think Tom's vocal quality, although Peter Gabriel is much more of like a tenor kind of deep voice, Peter Gabriel, when he goes into a falsetto, like a lot, it reminds me of York's singing style in this album. So anyways, listeners, listen to that album. That's more of an obscure Peter Gabriel song, but I listened to them back to back, and I was like, holy shit. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that too, because so far I would say also this album is stripped down in its vocal approach in the 3 songs we've heard. You know, we've talked about Radiohead are not a particularly harmony-driven band. They do harmony, and they do
Hail the Thief being the most.
They do layer stuff, but there's lots of songs where they have one vocal part. But this album, especially so far, I think that York is taking, the vocals are not necessarily super front and center on these first 3 songs.
No, and it does sound like a single track vocal. It doesn't sound like they're layering them.
It sounds like a single track vocal, and it also sounds like he's singing quietly.
Yeah,
he can go.
agree.
He has a big voice.
You're right.
But little by little, it doesn't sound like he's like projecting a ton.
Yeah, we're not in the there, coda moment.
No, so just again, there's a really conscious choice to keep this one kind of down, and it's a choice that I am very much digging in that last song. So up next we have Feral. This is a song about Pharrell Williams, and at the time that this came out, he was wearing that big kind of Arby's style bucket hat. And Radiohead was like, we're not just going to pay tribute to dubstep, we're going to pay tribute to the leader of the Neptunes in that crazy hat he's wearing with this song, Feral. It's also about Perry Farrell, the singer of Jane's Addiction.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, my analysis...
I'm, of course, being humorous.
Oh, okay. I'm just being humorous. So, I mean, I love the kind of, again, nature-driven self-title. So we have Bloom, Morning Mr. Magpie, Morning, and then Little by Little doesn't slot into that necessarily. I talked about how I think that's more of an allusion to they're easing you into traditional instrumentation. This disrupts that hypnotizing spell or effect the album has cast over me, at least, where the 3 songs, I'm like, oh, by the time Little by Little got there, I'm like, that sounds a little bit more what I'm used to. This song really does feel to me like a feral robot, short-circuiting in an organized manner, and kind of, it has a little traces of the title track from Kid A effect on me, but with better sequencing, in my opinion.
Okay.
Similar to Pull Revolving Doors. I like the slotting in of Pull better than I do the title track of Kid A, even though I really like that song a lot. And makes me think that if Sit Down, Stand Up had been track 5, it could have worked better. Because I really like this as the 4th song after they've eased you in through Little by Little. Those are kind of my general thoughts. Did that make sense to a degree?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I'm kind of listening for when the kind of like synth loop kicks in. Here it is, I think. So, okay. This is where I really hear kind of this contemporary influences.
Sure.
Of what was going on at the time bleeding in. You talked a little bit about on Hail to the Thief about how it's the first album where there's moments where you feel like their influences are like outpacing them in certain ways. And this to me sounds like Radiohead working in a genre that they're not comfortable in or good at. This is I do not like this song at all. And I like it a lot less than Bloom.
Interesting. To me, I like it the same.
Like, these sounds are stupid.
Okay.
Me. This do-do-do-do-do-do-do. Like, them doing this, like, driving kind of like house music bass line, it doesn't... Listen to this. I don't like this sound.
I want to be careful when
this
I
doesn't
say
sound like that.
Why I like it. The only reason why I like it is in context of listening to the album in sequence. Now, I do think the song Kid A, the title track from the album Kid A, is probably less jarring and more enjoyable, and maybe more of them working in a space that they're comfortable in. But similarly, I like it after Everything in Its Right Place and before, is it the national anthem?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I like this one, is in the context. It's very difficult for me to argue against a lot of the things you said, because I wouldn't pop that one on as a solo one, right? Like
sure.
I would Lotus Flower or Little by Little, the 2 songs before and after. So yeah, I really enjoy it in context as a reset, but I don't necessarily disagree that it's not their greatest strength.
It's interesting to me that you bring up the title track Kid A, because I would love some weigh-in from listeners who are more familiar with electronic music and electronic instrumentation and digital instrumentation versus analog instrumentation. Because I'm about to be the king of limbs and go out on a limb. I'm about to be the king of going out on a limb right now, which is, I've been thinking about why I so strongly prefer all of their electronic songs on Kid A and Amnesiac than any that came after. One thing I really like is that once that becomes a part of Radiohead's musical vocabulary, it never leaves.
Totally.
But there are no electronic songs, as in electronica songs, on In Rainbows.
Yeah, you could say 15-step, but that's a sequenced beat that the drum comes in on.
Exactly. It's always it's a spice that they have in their cabinet from here on out, and I love that.
Totally.
But I'm just finding this as we do the podcast. This is not like a rule that I've had. I just have found, any of their straight electronica songs after Amnesiac tend to be my least favorite parts of the album. I'm talking about Hail to the Thief.
Right,
and
Backdrifts, Mixomatosis.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, I even would say Mixomatosis is one where even though I'm not crazy about that song, that to me is more an example of 15-step where they're mixing in these sequenced instruments with live instruments. All that to say, I've been trying to figure out why that is, and I'm now, here is me on my limb, which is, I think that might have to do with kind of an analog versus digital approach. I'm kind of guessing that the technology at their fingertips in 2011 is so much more accessible than it is in 2000.
Yeah.
In 2000.
Yeah.
Or in 1999
when
they're making Kid A. And so I think that this might be an example to me of limitations kind of serving the creative process better.
Yes, man.
And I just find the sounds that they're making in Kid A, that song or Idiotech, warmer and more interesting and more unique than I do any of the sounds that we just heard in Feral. And so to me, Feral sounds just kind of like a laptop song. And it sounds like a laptop song made by Radiohead, to where I'm not just like completely dismissing it or being just like,
sure,
sucks. It just doesn't sound particularly unique or distinct to them other than Tom's voice. Mm-hmm. The sounds all sound like sounds I could hear on any album in 2011.
Yeah.
And so I would love people to kind of tell me where I might be wrong about that, but thank you. But I just think that they are
even I might be wrong. That intro, wow, that's 2000, and that sounds more inventive than this. And I know I interrupted you, but that's
no, I just feel like maybe it's just they're not as easily able to build an electronic song earlier in their career, and that's making inherently more interesting results. Because when I hear them doing that kind of like, I don't know, man. I'm just like, this just sounds like something that like a bedroom DJ would make up to me a little bit.
Well, I was thinking about this with Kid A as well.
Am I making sense?
Absolutely. And I want to just build off of the critique you're making in that, in kind of, I would say, just some of the objections or issues you had with Bloom. The song that it reminded me of quite a bit is Idiotech. Now, Idiotech is what this podcast is named after, and is also one of their most celebrated songs by Radiohead fans and these fans here. It is derived from a electroacoustic experiment, Johnny Greenwood. I don't have the vocabulary to describe precisely what he was doing, but it's very, very inventive, and it was an experiment. But the way that they have, there's barely a musicality to it until York's vocals come in, which is what makes it so impressive. But you have that electroacoustic, and then the wah, wah. So there's very little guidance for a vocal melody. And yet that vocal melody is one of the most recognizable and sing, it's hard to sing along to, but it's very much there. And I think, just to go to your point of like maybe the limitations are what made them a little bit better. Like I said, electroacoustic experiment. It's a lot of fucking around with wires and older equipment. And that was intentional. They were using messing around with equipment from like the 1940s, I think. I could go on and on and on. I think that in cinema and film, whatever you want to call it, and in music and in a lot of endeavors, you brought up the Star Wars prequels earlier. I mean, such a great example, of like sometimes the limitations are what can make something, great.
Yeah, there's that lightning in a bottle factor.
Yeah.
And I don't think I'm wrong here too, because we know that this was a digital approach because they're looping themselves. I'm not saying they didn't use any analog sequencers or drum machines or anything like that. I'm sure they did. And with Radiohead, it's usually a multifaceted approach to the songwriting. But I think that when they were sampling themselves and other kind of field recordings and even other, I think Idiotech also contains a non-original sample. I believe that snare sound is
that's what he was running through an electroacoustic. Right. Yeah.
There you go. So when they're sampling themselves or things outside of themselves on those old albums, I just think that it's being run, even if it is looped, it's being run through analog sequencers, and those old electronic instruments just give you a kind of like intangible weirdness that is missing from some stuff on King of Limbs for me, where it sounds a little antiseptic when they are doing the looping on software. So I think it's kind of a software versus hardware thing for me, and I just prefer the hardware.
Man, that was your TKOLHT.
Thank you.
Very well. Yeah.
Wait, what's HD stand for?
Hot take.
Oh, HT.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood you. You want to get that clean again?
Yeah. That was your TKOLHT.
Oh, TY.
YW.
Should we go to the next song?
Yeah, let's go to LF.
All right. This is Lotus Flower.
So we're back to a nature-driven thematic title, which I really enjoy. Thus concludes my review of the King of Limbs. No, I really, really love that. Lotus Flower is so evocative of Egyptian hieroglyphs and paintings and just...
Now, this synth bass line, this may be digital. This may all be digitally rendered, but to me, this is what I'm looking for, and it's just got that little bit of
that noise in the background. That's a string scrape. Very reminds me of a Linkin Park song. I'll just say,
sure.
But so well used.
So this is another straight up electronica one, right? Very much not a rock song at all. This one has the sauce for me. This is sounding weird, cool, and even though it's not the craziest groove I've ever heard or something that another band would never do, it's got that distinct Radioheadiness.
That's the thing is it's not that another band that maybe Radiohead were influenced by, that are maybe more obscure electronically, had never done this, but this, I mentioned Linkin Park. And by the way, I'm not here to shit on incredibly successful bands, but I just think that Linkin Park do cite Radiohead as a tremendous influence, and good for them. But just that string scrape, I love this chorus. And the way the bass is so strong, I get vibes all the way back to Climbing Up the Walls, Walker.
Sure.
Like, this makes sense that was 14 years ago and that the recording and engineering and bass playing has grown that much. But what is he playing? Is it a fretless bass? Or on Climbing Up the Walls, or a synth bass or something like that?
Yeah, he's playing a synth.
Yeah, and I mean, this might not be the same, but like it makes sense because that's the most present string instrument I hear.
Well, I think you can hear that when Colin plays the synth, he plays it like a bass. He puts this one, it just has the human touch. Like, even when the bass line comes back in, I'll point out, there's a little thing that I like. Also, the weird delay on this snare sound is cool.
Yes.
Listen to this. It sounds like it's underwater. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I have... I'm sorry, I know you wanted to point out the bass.
Okay, so... That's it. I just like that he hits the note twice there.
Yeah, no, it's great.
It's
going back into what Johnny does on I Might Be Wrong in the live performances. He adds in an extra, and you could just say double time or whatever, you know. Just to the point about the drums, I think the drum track sounds both organic and sampled, but it's interwoven with a very natural sounding hi-hat is what I hear. Mm-hmm. And it could be sampled, but... And this is the first song, I think, where the synth electric piano provide the other melodies in a very strong way for Tom's vocals to bounce off of and not harmonize with each other, but you know what I'm saying, where you could really pick out that melody.
These hand claps are super cool, too.
Yes.
Yeah, this song rules. I really like this one.
Yeah, and I'm hearing, for the first time in a while, quite a bit of Bono influence in the singing.
Oh, sure.
And it's hard sometimes to compare Radiohead in this era to U2. Not that U2 aren't amazing musicians, but they have stuck... Well, that's not true. In pop and Zooropa, they definitely experimented. That said, structurally, their songs are, a lot simpler than a lot of Radiohead songs, but I really, really hear... Bono doesn't go into a falsetto such as this a lot, but it's something about his singing is really evocative of that. And again, very Peter Gabriel in his falsetto a little bit, too.
I get that.
Peter Gabriel wouldn't sustain a falsetto for this long of a song, but, sounds like, not influenced by, guys. There's that bass line you're talking about. Oh, it's so tight. We talk all the time about Tom York's amazing dancing, and the video to this, his dancing is famous, but folks, watch some of the From the Basement. The thing I love about Colin, as shy as Johnny is known to be, and Colin is a very shy person as well, he has his own dance moves, but he's got a bass on at all times. I love it. A lot of lip biting and a lot of head movement, and it's cool because the bass cuts in and out, but when they're playing live, he has to know when to stop.
Yeah.
He'll keep his right hand going to keep the groove on. It's a really, really cool technique.
Yeah, Tom York is really in his bag, just kind of fashion and vibe-wise during this period. So
hell yeah.
The video of Lotus Flower is him dancing. He's making kind of an unfortunate hat choice in that video.
Oh, I feel like he's kind of poking fun at himself a little bit. Or no.
Okay, I don't know. That's generous. I mean, I guess I wouldn't take it off the table.
Fun, but he Please go ahead.
No, that's it. I mean, it's just he's got like kind of a pork pie hat on in the video. Yeah. Maybe he's poking fun at himself. That wasn't clear to me. Now, I love Tom York's dancing, and I think people...
It became a very famous meme.
It became a meme from this video, and I think that people, even in memeing it, like his dancing is embraced. But you know, in the From a Basement performance, he has a little vest on. I will say, I don't think 2011 was the most fortunate time in the many looks of Tom York, and I'm not hating. Tom York is like a style icon to me.
Sure.
And you gotta take some risks when you do that.
Yeah.
And they're not all gonna age super well. But I don't know. The early teens, I think, is a little bit of a weird liminal space in fashion that.
Oh, you mean like 2010 on?
Yes, I think I think that era looks a lot more. I think 10 years ago looks a lot more dated than like even like 15 years ago do now.
Okay. I'm really excited. A little preview for the listeners. We are going to be. Is it okay if I give a little preview? Walker and I are going to be discussing the looks of Tom York.
Yes.
Favorable or unfavorable for us in an upcoming episode, and just a little trailer for a Fox Newsian style debate that episode will be. I really like Tom York's fashion choices in the music video in this era and all of that.
Oh, I love this. Yeah. And also, this is the spectrum of thought that you get on Fox News is two people that love Trump, but, it's like, well, I love his racism. Well, I love his misogyny. That's me and Zach. We're not open to talking to people that don't love Radiohead.
Well, I love his love for the environment.
Yeah.
Well, I love it.
Yeah.
Songwriting about love.
I love how much deportations went up on his watch. It's like, I loved the surge in hate crimes. Can these two ever get along?
I do think, though, Tom's hair, because he's rocking the man bun and getting closer to the shoulder length hair starting in 2011 is really cool. We're no longer doing the like. Anyways,
I'll save my thoughts on this. I do think he's in a cool hair era, and I don't think that like
you're right though.
I think like Tom's cringe is like, another person's coolest they'll ever be.
Yeah.
I just am like, oh, okay, we're in a little bit of a look here that is. It's just
sure.
It's not my favorite Tom look. That's all I
gotcha.
It's the king of limbs of Tom looks, where I don't hate the title, but I don't love it as much as other things.
I will say though, and I do want to say this before we start the next song.
I know what my favorite Tom look is, but I will save that until our expose next time.
I can't wait because I don't know what that would be for you. So I think you called attention to, in a really, really thoughtful and cool way during our In Rainbows episode, the sort of like settling in, Mm-hmm. I believe Tom York was born in 1967, so probably recorded and wrote most of In Rainbows 38, 39,
Mm-hmm.
But I still sense a lot of Hail to the Thief angst, especially when I watch the Scotch Mist.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that might just be the aggression in his playing, it's all vibes, but I really do feel like the movement and watching some of the live footage, there seems to be a little bit more of a relaxedness,
Mm-hmm.
and even when we saw the Smile Live, I mean, Tom made a wonderfully spicy comment about how fucking cold it was, in there.
Yes.
So he's still got that same Tom Yorkness, that bite, but I don't know. And I see that a lot in the music video. And granted, that is a directed production, so he's going to behave and appear a certain way. But I just don't think that you can fake that entirely, especially if you're not an actor.
Totally.
So I don't know. That was kind of me.
No, I love confident Tom that we're dealing with at this point in his career. It's great.
Confident, but not off-putting. It almost seems like he's less resentful of everyone in a way.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Yeah. He's chilling out, man. Okay. This next song is called Codex. Cool opening here. I like that. The swell and then sudden cutting off of that vocal. So those little digital kind of sprinkles there. Those are cool.
Mm-hmm.
That. Maybe a guitar.
And it elongates
rendered.
as the song goes on, which I love. Are you familiar, just off the top of your head, with codex? What the meaning of that word?
I was going to ask you what codex means.
So, from my understanding, a codex is like an ancient text that usually refers to possibly religious text, but like, ancient stories. It's a manuscript, right? Or like a, I don't know, my phone's off, but if you want to just pop it into like dictionary.com or whatever. But I think it...
Oh, is it like a key to understanding like symbols and hieroglyphs and stuff?
It can be, yeah. That could be a cipher too, though. But a codex typically refers to scripture sort of manuscripts.
It's the ancestor of the modern book.
Yes, exactly.
Instead of being composed on sheets of paper, it used sheets of vellum, papyrus, and other material. It's often used for ancient manuscript books with handwritten content.
So that was my understanding. I think the first one was the more literal, finite definition, but I think of it as the second one, like manuscript. So, to me, this might be a big fucking stretch, but what I think of it is, if it's a codex is sort of a window into the past, I think that it's maybe self-referential of Pyramid Song. It's not rhythmically the same thing like that, but to me, because of the sounds like comes to mind, obviously invoking Radiohead is the safest bet, but like it really gives me the similar feelings of passing away with a melancholy sense of peace, possibly rebirth a little bit, and I don't know.
The melody and chords are much lighter than
see, that to me is very
this
evocative
horn section. Can we just let this
Oh,
part?
of course.
I just wanted to make sure that they heard a little bit of that. Please continue.
No, of course, thank you. Those horns though, and the way they kind of sustain, remind me of what I always thought of as kind of mermaid sounds in Pyramid Song. That Johnny is doing on the Owens Martineau, right? Same as in Where I End and You Begin. They remind me of mermaids or whale or whatever. It's horns this time. We have a little bit more of a major uptick there. So that's why, like I said, why it does remind me of Passing Away very much in a filmic sense. Like, and that tracks too with what the band had accomplished working with filmmakers. But yeah, it really gives me Pyramid Song, and I prefer it to that song. Wow. If we were to compare it, I love Pyramid Song. I recognize what a work
TKOLHT right there.
It's just because Pyramid Song doesn't have really anything that it's more like videotape for me, where it's like the thoughts of a dying person without an illuminated. I think of this as a rebirth, like of somebody who is going to be reborn after they die. I just love it.
That's beautiful. I think this song is so great. I don't have nearly the analytical level of commentary to give that you did, but this is one that as I listen to this album a lot, I'm like, how the hell did I miss this song? It's so gorgeous, and it's prettier than anything they've done in a while. When it changes to the chords, whatever chords it changes to, it is, the water's warm. It changes to like a major chord there.
Yeah.
And it's so nice and pretty. And it does have a really kind of positive, even though it's like, it's a very like end creditsy song.
Yeah.
But it does have, I could see it being the more like optimistic sibling to Pyramid Song,
which is, I think, why I love it. And this is one that was familiar in my King of Limbs catalog from going back to it. I would probably say 4 out of the 8 tracks I could have remembered the melody in like 2012. You know what I'm saying? But this one, because Pyramid Song, I was so struck by when I first heard it, really enjoyed it. And then it's just, even though as much as I've always loved Amnesiac, it's just, it didn't speak to me. And I love the technicality of it so much. It's still, it's so funny that this song, I just spent the entirety of it comparing to another song. Well, whatever, what are you going to do? I just think it's because the feeling this one gives me every year I get older. You think about maybe, how your life is shortening a little bit, every year that you get older. And I just love the optimism of this one a little bit more that is provided melodically just for me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, would it totally mess up anything that you have arranged over there if we plug in my phone for 15 seconds to play the beginning of a song, just the first 20 seconds of it that I think Codex sounds identical to?
Sure.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Not identical. I'm sorry, listeners. That very much sounds like. The tempo's a little bit different, but...
Codex was the one that sounded the most Peter Gabriel to me in my listens of this.
Walker, these are even in the same key.
Is this Red Rain?
In Your Eyes.
In Your Eyes.
We don't have to listen to the whole song, but
Great song. Now I want to listen.
I mean...
Yeah, I get it. The chord changes.
Rhythm is almost... I mean, this is a faster song tempo-wise, but the striking of the piano... And then let's just let the major chord come, and then we'll switch back to Radiohead.
Oh, and then this falsetto right here. Dude, you're really going to get my ass back on a Peter Gabriel kick.
Major. Oh, no. See, that's a Radiohead thing to do. It would have made sense to come it right there, but... Okay, so...
Do you think Say Anything would have worked as well if when he was holding up that boombox, he was playing a Radiohead song? I bet the movie would not have been
He was playing
a hit.
Creep. It's like, we know you're a creep. You're stalking. No, but like, and just talking about PG real quick, where I think, and I'm talking Tom York specifically. I don't know what Johnny Greenwood listens to.
Probably just like fucking like...
He probably listens to a lot of the
non-Western
Omar
music all
solo
the time.
albums.
Yeah.
That are just like crazy
He just
noise.
like listens to like Chinese violin all day.
Actually, he does listen to a lot of Eastern music. But with Peter Gabriel, guys, folks, when you scroll back to his first 4 solo albums, really, and I realize a lot of Peter Gabriel may sound dated to modern ears, and to me sometimes as well, but Tom York very into digitization, electronic music, that Uncle collaboration. It even Wolf at the Door. It borders on rap without ever being cringy.
Mm-hmm.
How that was very much Peter Gabriel in this late 70s and 80s,
Right? With world music.
Yeah. So that maybe I'll I just spent the last song comparing it to a song in Radiohead's back catalog and another artist, but it's just very, 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 very interesting to me. I talked about Stevie Nicks, kind of sometimes the vocals reminding me of her a little bit over dissonant chords on the Hill of the Thief episode. I was so struck by it on this album.
I like that. That's a good comparison. Good call. Good catch. I also would not mind if on King of Limbs, if they dropped Farrell from the album and just put Peter Gabriel's In Your Eyes in its place. Okay, so we got 2 songs left, don't we?
Yeah.
So what's next? We have one of the 2 songs that I remembered from this album from when it came out that I knew that I liked was the following song. This is Give Up the Ghost. So working in a very mellow mode on this one. And we have that layering of Don't Hurt Me. And that just goes through this whole song. By far the most acoustic sounding thing that we've had on the album too, and not just in reference to the fact that this is obviously being played on an acoustic guitar, but that also percussion, that hitting of the 3 there, sounds like it's maybe a water drum, maybe just a bongo, but it's something nice. It sounds like some sort of animal skin percussion instrument.
or hitting the body of an acoustic even.
Oh,
like,
I think.
Like in,
that's a good call.
Like in Black Swan.
Sure.
Well, the live performance of Black Swan.
Right. That's a good call. Maybe it is that.
Because it has that wooden resonance that when you tap on an acoustic guitar.
All I know is it's a very nice sound. And now we talked kind of about, or I asserted that this album was not really heavy on vocal arrangement. But in this song, what we end up having is kind of just a building of vocal parts. Once something comes in, it doesn't really drop out.
I love it.
And now you can hear back there, in addition to the "Don't Hurt Me," it's repeating the "In Your Arms." And then that really, is that Colin probably playing really high up on the neck of the bass there?
Or Ed. Oh, that, yeah. The kind of that could be Ed elongating a...
But that...
Yeah.
Is that a low... It's either low guitar or high bass. I'm not sure which.
I think high bass.
And now a harmony with the "Don't Hurt Me."
So what I find really interesting and unique about this song, it's very much in harmony with the last one, is it's kind of, this is different than the last song, but I feel like these two work so well together. It's almost like a gospel call and response, like stripped down sort of, blues is typically call and response. It's not quite that, but again, speaking of Amnesiac, it's unlike Amnesiac, where the front four tracks of Amnesiac are variant, right? You have Packed Like Sardines, then Pyramid Songs. You have some sort of digital electronica, then straight to voice and piano, right? Mm-hmm. Then you have Pull back to electronica. Then you have You and Whose Army, right? So we have one and one. Mm-hmm. I love the way in this album they do familiar instrumentation in sequence with one another. It's so smart. And I talked about how in the last one, it feels to me like a little bit more of an optimistic version of Pyramid Song, like someone who is passing away, but there's some level of optimism. It could work so well in a film. With this one, I feel like it's a continuation of that. Give Up the Ghost, too. Mm-hmm. And I just think that the Radiohead are so evocative in this song. Like, I just picture the way each vocal melody elongates, like you said, never goes away. It's like watching, like, mist evaporate or, like, stay in the air. Or fog or something like that, which fog, very much like it's just, I don't mean to I'm not trying to make everything tie in visually so much, but it's so strong on those two songs for me. Or maybe a feeling.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I also feel like with this song, they're like not afraid to be pretty.
No.
And I really like that. Not that I think Radiohead is afraid to be pretty, but I think that they have an instinct that is an instinct I really like about them, where they'd rather be interesting.
That feels like a song they would have cut from Hail to the Thief.
Totally.
It's too pretty. Whereas this one, it's so embraced. I love it.
Yeah, and maybe I'm saying that too because I know Tom is on record as it taking him a long time to appreciate his own voice because it was too pretty.
Yeah.
And that's an instinct that I wish, I mean, not to turn this into a negative, but often I'm shown music by people who I respect and I think have good taste, but it's like everything is too nice sounding. Mm-hmm. And like, it's just something that I appreciate about Radiohead a lot, that it's like, if they have something that just sounds nice, they're going to fuck with that in some way. They're going to put a weird sound in there, or they're going to make the lyrics super depressing, or they're going to change keys in the middle of it. They're going to do something that kind of subverts that expectation of like nice sounding pop music.
For sure. But
when they lean into it, which I think they did in those last two songs.
Yeah.
I don't mind it at all. I mean, they really, I feel like they've like earned it, and it's a very well earned, nice moment on this album.
Yeah.
That has had some pretty, for me to great and missed effect, has had some pretty like harder to access moments. Mm-hmm. This one is like, who wouldn't like this?
Yeah, so well said. I'm not going to say that Codex and Give Up the Ghost are my two favorite songs, but I think they are both so pretty, and they are a little bit simpler. But what you were saying though too about how they'll subvert expectations in a way. I think of my two favorite songs off of Hill of the Thief. So 2 + 2 = 5 is an F minor to, an altered F minor, then do an F major, then do it, so it's just a very, very, but two of the most beautiful, or one of the most beautifully harmonized vocal, right? So they always counteract what might be like, what is this? Is just noise and weirdness coming at me? Same with the end of There, There, where it's, B minor, D minor, A minor, E minor, right? But the vocal harmonies are so gorgeous. And like you were just saying, I just love that those ones are stripped down. It very much reminds me of Bulletproof, I Wish I Was on Give Up the Ghost. Much better song, but we're going all the way back to where it was Tom just kind of slowing it down. That what the Bends may have felt like the last time, where they were like, oh, let's do a slow one, But here it's just all that maturity and growth is so exciting. I don't know.
Yeah, and I guess the kind of electronic element of this one is that they're looping vocals.
Yeah,
and that's cool because that's different than what they've done on the rest of the album. I want to go back in this song a little bit because as we were listening to it just now, I just kind of caught that Nigel is doing a similar mixing trick as he does in How to Disappear Completely. So let's see if I can get back to kind of right when he says I should give up the ghost.
Yes.
So. So it layers in, it goes super huge reverb to the point that you can hear the reverb more than the vocal track. And it kind of blends in to the whole sonic landscape, but then he brings that in your right up close again.
Gosh, man, this song is just... I don't mean to be so metaphysical, but it sounds like infinity. It sounds like what I imagine if there is a spirit or a soul and it leaves your body and there is some sort of transcendent existence where, like the Stargate, a Star Child scene in 2001, you don't know what that entity is experiencing, but you know that they're conceiving of the universe in a way or understanding it in a way that a human brain couldn't conceive. The way, I'm not trying to say Nigel's like a god, but the way he weaves back those vocals that never settled and they're somehow harmonizing with the new part it's like a loop. And it is a literal loop, but it's a beautifully infinite loop. And or even think of what was that Pixar movie, Soul, was it? Just stuff like that. I'm not listeners, I'm not saying anything specific, but what I imagine too, if we were able to perceive stuff in a different dimension, is like that song is so incredible with the production.
Yeah, I like the theme of kind of like rebirth that you're pulling from this album, which is also making me like the title better because the King of Limbs, and I guess I'm basing this partly on the cover. It sounds like a scary guy to me, but I suppose you could also look at that as like a multi-human organism too, right?
Yeah.
Like it could be a statement of like a collective consciousness or something in that vein as well.
I cannot wait to talk with you about the artwork once we play. What is the closing track?
Well, the last track on the King of Limbs is a little number called Separator.
Walker, what is this song? Well, let me narrow it down. There's a particular song we both love from In Rainbows that this song reminds me of a little bit in its production. All I Need.
Sure. This percussion track
so cool
is some of the nicest sounding stuff ever.
I don't air drum very often, but it's so fun to just imagine. Yeah, I picture almost like Pong, but in a very satisfying way.
It's a really nice mix of the digital percussion sounds and the acoustic drums. This song is very un-Radiohead-y to me.
Okay.
It sounds almost like, do you know Dr. Dog?
Yeah, oh yeah.
It reminds me of Dr. Dog.
Very come into prominence at this time as well.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of them or Arcade Fire, where it's like a pretty like buoyant, like uplifting sounding chord progression and melody, but there's a lot of kind of slightly unusual sounds in it.
Yeah.
But it's a band, but it's also... This song sounds kind of like a 7-piece band to me, playing very quietly.
Yeah.
There's just a lot going on, but again, it's way down here.
Yeah.
It's very restrained. It's keeping it kind of under wraps the whole time.
Yeah.
Zach, I love this song.
There's your bass again, too. Walker, I love this song so much. I love everything you're saying. It immediately strikes with a darker minor flavor, like All I Need, even though All I Need is starts on a C major. And yet, Tom chooses to stay in a more bright register. And I love it when he does that. And so to me, what immediately came to mind is this song seems to invert the musical approach of 15-step. So instead of the bass guitar providing a counter melody to steer the song towards a darker tone, the electric guitar, which is upcoming, the electric guitar brightens the melody, and we'll hear that. So it's going to come in. So it's doing the opposite of what 15-step does with the bass guitar. It's brightening it towards the major and working in tandem with Tom's vocal melody that has been in a more major quality against this minor sounding flare the whole time.
Okay,
so
I like that.
It's a switch, and I don't know that, like, as I was talking about, and Walker, actually, can you take a guess what that guitar line reminds me of a little bit in terms of the guitar player and tone?
Is it another Radiohead thing or
No.
something else?
I get very
Elliot?
no, I get
Don't tell me.
okay.
Mars Volta?
No, I get Siamese Dream, Adore vibes.
Oh, sure.
This could be, or on like one of the like We Only Come Out at Night, like one of their slower, beautiful ones on disc 2.
It's also unusual for a Radiohead song. It shows how restrained and quiet this song is, that the thing that kicks in is a totally clean guitar.
It sounds like Today. Like a little bit, you know?
Yeah, but I mean, what Radiohead song kicks in halfway through with a clean guitar?
Nothing. What rock and roll song is the big moment when the bass guitar comes in that makes it to a minor 15-step?
Yeah.
It's like, it's such a Radiohead thing, but like pertaining to that being sort of, you know, not directly, but like the inverse of 15-step. I don't know if that's a conversation they had, or if that's a way Nigel decides when to bring things in and out. You know, because this is like a Nigel Godrich album, is what I'm realizing. And I know he's done all their albums, but I mean, this is like so Nigel, and Radiohead providing the music. But like, I don't know if they had a conversation. Hey, this is going to be a percussive-driven album. Let's make sure we push conventional song form more.
Yeah.
And with that, I kind of think that they have to. Because I think when Tom writes in an unconventional manner, as he has on like in Rainbows, for instance, I think that might be more subconscious, maybe a little bit. But on this one, it has to be something that they talk about, you know, and I'm just speculating, but it's just so fascinating to me how they do that on Kid A and then on this album.
That's a great call. It's starting to end. I just want to alert listeners to this. So this is another song, like the other best moments on this album for me, that's very repetitive in terms of its groove, percussively, and the bass. Bass is playing a similar line through the whole song, but it changes into something completely different by the end because of that weird synth part that they morph in. So they're doing a good job on the best moments of this album of these kind of subtle changes that don't sacrifice the groove or the kind of like repetitive electronic style that they're going for, but they keep it from getting boring. Yeah. With this and Little by Little, and what was the other one we were talking about where they do that in a big way?
Lotus Flower?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
So-
King of Limbs.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess we don't have to have the music playing, but I was wondering if we could just like listen to the last minute of or wherever that guitar came in. It's fine if it
Yeah,
doesn't
of
land right on
course.
it.
Let's go
Because I just want to talk about what I really felt. Yeah, perfect. So, listeners, here's kind of what I did, and I didn't do it purposefully to start, but really look at the album cover during each song. And I'm talking about if you start from 1 to 8, right? And for me, I can only speak for myself. What I started to see the creatures, what I initially saw as very harmful or dangerous or scary. By the time you get to this song, they're simply just different. They're to me, what I started to think is they're just as scared of us, if not more, as we are of them. And they are almost cute, like with this like brightness, right? And they aren't after us. We might even be invading their privacy. Maybe they're deep sea creatures, like where it's black and we're somehow, able to survive down there. Like, what's this weird human looking, it almost like, I love it when sci-fi comedies or movies will flip it on its head and that aliens are like just as scared of us, and that's what these remind me of. I mean, the creature on the left looks like a Dumbo octopus. It's almost cute. And they do look like I'm not saying I found it scary, but I've always thought of until I did this little experiment of, I'm not saying stare at it uninterrupted during each song, but check in, I mean, the way you're going to be feeling during Bloom and Feral, I think these creatures are going to look decidedly different than during this really, really bright part of Separator or Give Up the Ghost, because I do think the creature on the right looks very much like a ghost. So yeah, I just wanted to
That's a great observation. I think of these things as, I've never done DMT, but there's something that people report interacting with these kind of ethereal beings.
Yeah, Horus, like very Egyptian, human kind of animal complex.
Yes, and visions of like tentacles is also a very commonly reported side effect from DMT. And that's kind of what these things look like to me, is something that are always there. We just don't have the ability to see in our normal frame of mind.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I know what you mean. They can, depending on like the context that you give them, they can look very menacing or I liked what you said, just different.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that Calvin and Hobbes when they go to Mars and Calvin doesn't understand why the alien is scared of them. And he says, well, we're regular Earthlings. We're not weirdos from another planet like he is.
Right. I love that. And that's how I felt. Like they look at, the way their big eyes are looking at you. It's like it initially it could look intimidating when you contrast it against those darker, harsher, unable to discern the melody. And as I was talking about, like, the feeling I get or just, whatever is like transcending our understanding and perception of the universe in those songs like Give Up the Ghost, and it's like maybe you see creatures like these or something. I don't know. This is so personal, so I don't mean to make it sound like, do this and you'll feel that. But I just think that Stanley Donwood and Tom York are working so well in harmony with one another on the naming convention and then the art right here. And it's not artwork that was ever amongst my favorite or is at this point. I do love the inner sleeve, those, but I'm just talking about the album cover.
Take a look at that.
And even the way that the trees and the limbs are set against those creatures on the front look like veins, right? Like veins in a body. I don't know why is it endocrine system, but yeah, and that brings a lifelike quality to them, which I think is just really, really cool.
I love this cover.
Yeah,
I think it's awesome. Should we talk overall impressions of this album?
Sure.
Do you want to go ahead?
No, I'll let you go first. I would love to hear it from you, actually.
Yeah, so I think I've kind of tilted my hand in a lot of ways about how I feel about this album, both positively and negatively, but I do want to attempt to sum it up.
Yeah.
And I want to start with the positive. I want to say what I really like about this album. This has been a really exciting process of getting to kind of discover this album. I shouldn't have slept on it for this long. There are songs on here that are as good as anything Radiohead has ever done. What I really like about this album is the quietness of it. I really dig. I almost feel like this is the closest album to my fantasy project that I now mention once an episode minimum of like a.
But a lot of new listeners might be here just for TKOL.
Fair enough. So, one thing I've talked about a lot is that my like fantasy is basically a lo-fi Tom York album that, if he recorded an album basically in an Elliott Smith style where he just kind of layered guitar, pianos, and vocals. This is obviously not that. This is a Radiohead album. It's a full band composition, but the quiet approach is really neat, and it reminds me of some of the strengths of In Rainbows in that way, where they just because they can do something doesn't mean that they do it. They have a really, really high taste level, and they know when less is more. And I just think that that's really cool, and I can see why the kind of lack of fanfare around the release of this album kind of coincides with that.
Yeah.
When Tom York says it's kind of like this album never existed, I don't think that is maybe what they wanted, but I also feel like the band was just very comfortable in the place they were at. They were a little bit too big to fail, and it resulted in this thing of just like, yeah, we're going to kind of quietly put out this next album. It's shorter.
We're not going to break an economic model.
Yeah. And I feel like that is all very much in harmony with the way it sounds. The other thing I really like about this album, I feel like it's very confident in what it's doing, even in the moments I don't like.
Sure.
So I'm not a big fan of Bloom, but the moments that I'm not a big fan of on Hail to the Thief, for example, to me sound like a band that is lost and not sure what they want to do.
Yeah.
And I don't feel that at any point on this album. I feel like they're doing exactly what they want to do. It's just not always what I want them to be doing.
Right.
But I think that you don't get the best moments on this album without them kind of being that sure of themselves.
Yeah.
And so I really like that. Ultimately, I really like King of Limbs, and that's why I wanted to just make sure that I say that emphatically and clearly before I'm not about to tear this album apart, but I do have an issue. The first one's pretty simple. I kind of think you lose a couple songs from this and you just call it an EP. And I get maybe why Radiohead don't want to do that, because if you release an EP, people are going to be potentially more dismissive of it. But I think that because this album is so much quieter in sound and in kind of promotional rollout than so much of their other stuff, I think that you might as well just lean into that a little more and just make it an EP. Obviously, the songs that I would cut would be Bloom and Feral. I would have told you up till yesterday I would also cut Mr. Magpie, but now I say you slot that in the middle, and it's nice for variety.
Yeah.
It sounds different than everything else, but I do think this album's really backloaded. I think where it really kicks in is once you get Little by Little.
Yeah.
And then you're kind of grooving, with the exception of Feral, which I think is an unfortunate kind of backslide. So, I would go Little by Little, Lotus Flower, Codex, Morning Mr. Magpie, Give Up the Ghost, and Separator.
As an EP?
As an EP.
Yeah.
And even if you don't want to call it an EP, it just would be short, so people would be like,
call it a PP.
I think that is tighter.
Yeah.
Having said all that, the fact that this thing is 38 minutes long and I don't like a couple songs off it really is not a big deal. There isn't a section. I was looking at Hail to the Thief again, and I was like, the reason I had such a hard time with Hail to the Thief is because there are sections where I feel really stuck in the muck, right? The sit down, stand up, sail to the moon, backdrift section.
Even Amnesiac, there's that suite that I would not say that you don't like. I don't want to speak on your behalf, but Knives Out, Morning Bell, and then Knives Out, Morning Bell, and then what is that other song where it's
Dollars and Cents.
Yeah, so even that is
I like
longer.
all those songs.
I know. I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm just saying that it's interesting that those are the moments that are kind of jammed together that you maybe don't love is just shorter. I think they just. I don't know. I'm sorry. I interrupted you.
No, not at all. Don't be sorry. I don't know that what I'm saying is that interesting. That's actually all I have to kind of say about the track listing and what I would do to improve the album. And it's with the asterisk of the stuff that I don't like. None of it completely ruins the flow of this album because it's short, and I do think that there is a real cohesion to what they're trying to achieve here. Zach, here's my other complaint.
Mm-hmm.
The approach that they are taking of sampling and looping themselves, to me, is an innovation that kind of adds nothing to this album, and I think does detract from the songs at moments. I think that, and I think this is backed up by watching them play these songs live in the studio and from a basement. I think that something my girlfriend says a lot that I believe is attributed to RuPaul. And by the way, gosh, Walker, who are you? Tom York, circa the Benz, constantly trying to prove to everyone that you have a girlfriend. But something that she says a lot.
Is that RuPaul's drag show, or am I thinking of the right?
Yeah, RuPaul, as in RuPaul's Drag Race, but RuPaul's, 40-year icon at this point. Something that he or she, depending on what time you catch them at, likes to say is, well, that's nice for you, but what about us? And that is kind of how I feel about the sampling approach to this album. I think that it kind of neuters the songs that I don't particularly like and doesn't really help the songs that I do like. And when you watch them play these songs in From a Basement, Radiohead knows how to play these songs with the restraint that they have on the album. I understand that they're doing something that's less big.
Right.
But they have the skills as musicians to achieve that. And for example, in a song that I do like, in Mr. Magpie, a song that I've come around to. I think that if we can just, that's little by little. So that kind of off-time hi-hat sound, I think it's a little distracting and annoying in the album version. And I think that's because it sounds a little bit unnatural or uninteresting because of the sequencing, because of the looping. When I watch them play this From a Basement, it has that. And again, I used this word before and I'm going to use it again. It's a little bit of an intangible.
Right.
They're playing the exact same thing. They're playing it incredibly.
But it has that human quality, which humans are inherently imperfect.
It's got
exactly.
Yes. Here's a metaphor that works.
Sure.
It takes it into a little bit of an uncanny valley. Vibe.
Great metaphor.
And there's just something about them removing that artifice from it. Even if they're playing it the exact same arrangement, which on a lot of the From a Basement stuff they are, it makes it better. And
has that human quality.
I don't really get why they did this. And that is my other quibble with the album. Now, on the songs that I love, it doesn't really bother me, but I still don't think it adds anything. And I kind of wonder a little bit if this is a little bit of Radiohead having to find an angle because of how lauded they are at the time. An example being the video for House of Cards. It's the first video without cameras. I like that video. It's cool. But you can also feel the pressure of them. Everything they do has to be visionary in some way.
They're succumbing to that, and they're not then on this album in a way. I feel like they are trying to do that, but they're also not giving you a rock song.
That's true, and I think that ultimately, I think this is a very, and I mean this completely non-condescendingly. It's what I like about it. This is a nice little album.
Yeah,
and I feel like we looped all our acoustic and analog instruments through a digital process and played everything that way is them kind of trying to put a different coat of paint on it to make critics and music nerds care about it a little bit. That's the end of that point. I would love to know how you feel about any of this stuff.
Well, first of all, I just want to say I think that was a really, really good summation. And, you know, I think what's happened, not on every album, but between the two of us, is that there've been commentary or conversation provided from either one of us or something, you know, we heard someone else say or whatever that have enhanced our love and appreciation for either an album or a song, right? Or just us listening to it on our own a bunch. And it is kind of cool to hear an objection that I have not read online that was very well articulated, that made me maybe like a song a little bit less, you know, and because Morning Mr. Magpie is not my sacred cow of the album or anything. So I don't know. I think those are really, really good objections that don't diminish the innovation they were trying to push. And I also think it's cool too, because I think Tom York, Johnny Greenwood, I almost call him Ed Sullivan, Ed O'Brien, Phil, Nigel Godrich, and Colin clearly have other interests outside of making music.
Right.
And I don't know if they're all centered around using computers and software, you know, but I think it's cool that you kind of see a way for them to weave in their other interests into what their career is, right? Which is being musicians. And I kind of think of...
Wasn't Colin just driving a classic car through the studio a bunch during these sessions?
Yeah. Well, yeah, Colin's a big car guy.
I know. That's why
no, but I was resisting making a dumb joke, which I was going to say, no, that was Ed parking Colin's car. Because we don't.
Don't you ever apologize for making a dumb joke? I love that. Joke.
Yeah, I'm not down to start a Colin teasing parade here. I love that guy so much.
We already have our member of Radiohead who we tease.
Yeah.
Out of a place of jealousy.
But you know, as you were talking, and I've been thinking this for a couple days too, like putting this, I think context is so important. I don't think I would like this album if it was by a well-respected artist, but it was like their first or second album. Context is so key in life and in examining art, I think, right? Like, context is important. If I'm staring at a gallery piece, which I don't do often, but you know, and I love surrealist art or something like that, or something that not surrealist, something that looks like photorealistic, Renaissance art. And that's only what I like. And I'm not going to like a Jackson Pollock painting, right? But in context, I see that like it's this wonderful level of artistry that probably couldn't have existed without surrealist paint or without photorealistic painting before it, right? So context is so critical, and I think would I love like a peek of a There or them writing Paranoid Android part 2 and doing maybe, but like I think because you know what's possible within the Radiohead catalog, it makes me like this so much more because of all the things that you pointed out about the lyrical approach and all that. Like, it really made a difference, dude. And I'm not just saying that. Like, I really think I heard the lyrics and the vibes of King of Limbs differently because of a lot of the things that you had said. And I had always liked it, maybe a little bit more, maybe, you know, a little bit more than you had, but not all of it. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend that like I would throw on King of Limbs the same amount that I would any of the other albums besides maybe Pablo Honey. But as much as I hate to admit it, I do know that when we closed out Amnesiac, I disclosed that the King of Limbs would land in second to last spot overall. And that was just kind of a default move, you know? It wasn't that I'm like, oh, I don't like that album or anything, but I don't know where I would place my Radiohead albums anymore order-wise, because I think I said in one of our episodes that like it's like trying to rank a mood or good moments that you could have. Why do it that way? Radiohead is really about like a feel for me. And the only thing I could confidently say is that I'm pretty confident, not certain, that listening to the King of Limbs in the future is going to be something that occurs with a lot more frequency than listening to the Bends or listening to Hail to the Thief even, you know, or even In Rainbows at this point. And I know I'll find my way back to those because those are great albums.
But it has like some increased novelty because you haven't rotated it as much as the other ones.
Yeah,
too.
and like I said before, like I would put it on in the background at work, and that and I think that did help in my subconscious help it grow. But I just think that like for me personally, it is an album, as almost all of Radiohead's albums are, to be actively listened to and like participate in it. And I think that's part of that is because of Nigel and because of just the taste profile of the band. And talking about context, an artist that it really reminds me of their arc, where at least personally I was a little confused by it, but in context I love it a lot more, is P.T. Anderson. Like if you take a 3-movie cycle, There Will Be Blood is just part 2, right? You know? And of P.T. Anderson, PTA 2.0, I think Casey said, or something like that. And by the time you get to Phantom Thread, it's kind of like, why? You have Daniel Day-Lewis, you're P.T. Anderson. It's an interesting story, and it looks great. But then now as it's settled, and I've watched it a few more times, it's not my favorite of those 3 movies. The Master is. And I think The Master and There Will Be Blood is like really aggressive, and you know, even though it's a movie, but like it just, I remember just feeling like, yeah, it was good, but why make that movie? And now I don't feel that way at all. I'm like, I totally get it. And when you're an artist that wants to do something different, you can't conceive of what you want from that artist as a consumer of it,
right?
Because if it's going to be different and blow you away, you can't imagine what it is,
right? And
that's kind of how I think of the King of Limbs, and I do think A Moon-Shaped Pool is a back to basics, giant air quotes around it. And so I'm glad that they didn't continue down. I'm not going to say how I feel about that album relative to this one, but like I think it's fine to say that. And I'm glad they didn't maybe continue down such a muted experimentational path.
Yeah.
But I just love this album. I'm not trying to be Mr. Deep and be Mr. Reddit and say hot take. I don't think it's their best album or anything like that, but in context I love it, and I just think it's a really, really, really cool thing that they did.
I think that's not a hot take. I think it's a wonderful take. And I mean that. And I will say you have really given me a different appreciation of just kind of some of the themes, whether they kind of more exist in you or the album itself. These themes of rebirth and nature and things like that was not actually something that I was thinking about in my analysis of this at all. I was much more kind of focused on, do I like this sound?
Yeah.
And I really, really like that aspect of it that you kind of highlighted of it. I also really like how this exists in the context of their discography, leaving any editorial comments about A Moon-Shaped Pool aside. This is a nice outlier between that album and In Rainbows. I agree. I don't wish that more of Radiohead's music was this muted, but I think it's really cool that they made an album like this. I also, in terms of ranking it and it automatically being lower, man, this one really throws what I think I know kind of up in the air, because this is a lower one for me, and I like it so much that I know that I am going to have a really, really tough time. In terms of ranking Radiohead, the top 3 and the last 3 are going to be very, very difficult. And who am I kidding? The middle 3 too, because it's just like, I know that with my number 1, that it's like, when I think of number 2, I'm like, that can't be number 2.
Right. Oh, dude,
it's so perfect
so much.
And I think the same thing comes with the ones that are lesser for me, is it's just like putting them at the bottom of the list, putting an album at the bottom of the list that has Codex and Separator and Give Up the Ghost. Those last 3 songs, I'm like, this is a perfect suite of songs here. So I really, really like it. It's a good problem to have, I guess, to like something that is considered lesser so much that you still think it's great.
And like, absolutely, man. And like Phantom Thread, or pick your movie, listeners, or like Eyes Wide Shut has been the same experience, where it is at a slower pace, but I think both films, in terms of like what they're exploring, they are like a little bit of a later season, and I just love that I get to explore something a little bit mellow that is still beautiful and sophisticated and looks really cool and all that shit. And it's just, I don't know. And I was talking about exercising, running to it. Like there's something to it. I usually like driving faster music when I'm exercising. There is something interesting to me that on 3 of these tracks, or 3 tracks off this album, I like think of those as like, oh, those are the great songs. And I think it's because of the consistency of the rhythms and all that. So calmer music, isn't just that. You know? So I don't know. I really loved it.
So, Zach, I wanted to run through now that there's a fair amount of B-sides on this album. We're not going to play them all. I am going to just list them all off in case listeners want to find them. So the B-sides for this album, studio recorded B-sides, are Super Collider, The Butcher, Staircase, The Daily Mail, These Are My Twisted Words, and Harry Patch in Memory Of. Now, I'd like to play a little bit of those last 3, The Daily Mail,
Nice,
These
good
Are My
choice.
Twisted Words, and Harry Patch. I quite like Super Collider also, but I don't know that it's showing us anything too different than what we just heard on the album. So I thought we'd kind of hear what else they're working with that is, to me, sound like real outliers compared to what they ended up putting on. Is that good? You're
I
down with
love
those?
your selection, and yes, and I think the way you just put that outliers is great. So
Yeah, these are things that they recorded at the same time during those sessions, but did not make the album, and I think you can hear why. So I first became aware of this song the one time that I saw Radiohead live. Bonnaroo 2012, they played this and it hit me like a ton of bricks. I thought it was just absolutely gorgeous and had no idea what the heck it was.
it's so cool that you said outlier too. But I think this song does have a little bit more of a Moonshaped Pool feel to it, a little bit, potentially.
Very much so. This does not sound in...
Yeah.
This, especially in arrangement, as it kicks into a more full band arrangement, this would sound very strange on King of Limbs.
Yes.
I think it's one that maybe they recorded before they were using the more digitized approach that they ended up taking. But it's a ballad. It's a Radiohead ballad. It's a pretty song. And this, I'm going to play this. It's probably not a chorus, but functions as a chorus.
Mm-hmm.
Keep your prices down.
The Daily Mail being like their version of like TMZ is my understanding. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a gossip rag.
Yeah.
The New York Post, kind of.
Yeah.
It's like a shitty, trashy paper.
Might be a little. Yeah, it's so cool because this reminds me of a song that could have. The songs you hear in between Hail to the Thief and In Rainbows is maybe a B-side or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so cool.
And changes keys
Yeah,
here.
I love this. But we were saying how it could be on a Moonshaped Pool. It just goes to show you that like the band is cycling ideas a lot and putting them in their backlog.
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay if I keep talking during this part, right?
Yeah, of course.
I have in front of me this book, listeners, I can't recommend enough, by Jeff Tweedy. It's called How to Write One Song. And it's not an instructional booklet. He's a wonderful author, singer, principal member of the band Wilco. The American Radiohead is my take. But he just talks about so many different practices of changing up your word order. And there's even stuff in there like hit the table in front of you and yell. That's a song. It's a bad song. But that, and so he has very elementary exercises and then stuff that's like, I'm like, how in the world have I not thought of that? I'm not Jeff Tweedy. And I think I thought of Radiohead so much. Of course I'm going to, but like, just finding myself like, why did Nude exist for 10 years?
Right.
That's kind of how I feel about this song, where it could be on a Moonshaped Pool. Maybe not this part.
Well, this part, I feel like we're now in full blown like OK Computer town.
Yes, dude.
Like,
I love
really
it.
driving. This is very Beatlesy too, I think.
And it reminds me of the crescendo at the Smile concert, where listeners, I was in awe at what I was seeing. There's Johnny Greenwood was doing the most insane guitar solo I've ever seen.
Shredding, listeners.
Shredding, and then everything ended and converged on a G sharp, and we were. I felt like I was back in like Creep.
Yeah.
Like, Donna. And I was like, this guy, like, he rose to prominence in the 90s. I see it again. And that's kind of what that song reminds me of a little bit. It was that Smile crescendo. I wish I could remember that song, but I can't wait until it comes out.
So that's the Daily Mail. Very much a gorgeous song that I've loved for a long time, but I think it's does not at all fit with the vibe that they went for on King of Limbs.
No.
Now, this is one I was less familiar with. This is These Are My Twisted Words.
Song rocks, Walker.
This song is really rad. What we get here is an instrumental jam that goes on, I believe, for like 2 minutes before words kick in.
Which I love the title of that, too.
Yeah. We'll let it play for a second, then I'll probably fast
That's
forward.
fine.
Now, again, super cool. Maybe a little more of a studio jam, and therefore not something that they put on the album.
Mm-hmm. Very Smile again for me vibes, which, you know.
It sounds like a jam to me.
Yeah.
It sounds like a very good jam, but so it goes like
well,
this for
having
quite a
seen
while.
them jam live, though, is where I can fit it in more now.
So we're 2 minutes in still.
That's a nice way to start, Johnny. He loops in.
I hate you, Johnny. I hate you.
Ed. Oh, so tight. Listeners, I'm not trying to keep bringing this up, but again, having seen Johnny Greenwood play guitar at a very close range now, the thing I love, because this is him finger picking, Walker, I love that he's not afraid to do it when the song needs it. And, you know, I'm not somebody who finger picks a lot. I love using a pick. But why? If the song requires that you don't, like, it's fine, you know? Like, and I just love it.
Yeah.
The way he touches the guitar is so unique.
So this is very amnesiac, I think.
Mm-hmm. But so leading to the smile, or what they're doing with the smile is a better way to say it.
Then opens back up. So, cool 5-minute jam. I'm going to move on to the next thing. This is Harry Patch in memory of. Now, Zach, do you know what this song's about?
No.
So Harry Patch, I was like, what is this? So this is like this sounds right off of the Phantom Thread soundtrack. This is very just, honestly, I feel verklempt listening to it. Just a gorgeous Johnny Greenwood string arrangement. Harry Patch, Tom was moved to write this song after the passing of Harry Patch, who was briefly the oldest man in Britain, died at age 111, was the oldest survivor of trench warfare in World War I.
Wow.
Not the oldest surviving World War I veteran, period, but who specifically fought in the trenches. And so, like, you know, just like and actually I'm going to pull up the lyrics because they're very brief, but I thought it was just a very nice, kind of unusual example of, like, York being sentimental.
Mm-hmm. Kind of like the second to last song in The Eraser is what I've always loved this song, but I didn't know any of the backstory. But remember
Yeah.
Even though this is much brighter, and I won't.
Paradon Hill.
Yes.
Yeah, the lyrics are, I'm the only one that got through. The others died wherever they fell. It was an ambush. They came up from all sides. Give your leaders each a gun, and then let them fight it out themselves. I've seen demons coming up from the ground. I've seen hell upon this earth. The next will be chemical, but they will never learn. So I said it was sentimental, but it's actually a very foreboding warning about the nature of war. But it's such a pretty song. I'm just going to let it play a little. Listen to this part.
You're not wrong. Straight off Phantom Thread.
And it sounds also giving me shades of motion picture soundtrack.
Well, don't get sentimental. It always ends up drivel.
There you go. Don't get any big ideas like listening to this whole song because we have to move on.
Nice.
Now, okay, I want to show you a couple live versions of stuff.
Okay.
So, listeners, I do highly recommend the hot take. King of Limbs is their best album. People invariably mention.
You mean HTTKOLs?
Yes, exactly. Rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? They invariably will tell you got to go watch the From a Basement concert to get it. Now, I do agree that you should watch that. I think it's a bad defense of an album to say you have to go.
Like when people recommend shows, you got to get through the first season. And it's like,
why?
Fuck you. No. Like,
thank you.
Yeah, it's like
first 4 of episodes are bad, but then it gets pretty good.
It sounds like a Netflix show to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Wire, the first 4 episodes are hard to understand. They are brilliant pieces of television.
I never understand. It's why do I have to do all this work? It's a TV show. Like there's so many things
in episode 5.
Right. It's like there's so many things I could watch that are just good right off the bat.
Oh, no kidding.
It's like, yeah, hey, don't pick up one of those thousands of books that you've never read. Instead, watch this thing that's bad for the first 2 seasons so you can
gotta
numb
get
out
through the
during
first
the third
season
one.
is always the pitch. Always.
I don't
Gotta
understand.
get through the first season. No, I don't.
Yeah. Watch me not do it. I don't got to get through nothing. All right. So I just wanted to play a little bit of what I think are examples of the songs that I don't particularly like made much better by their live orchestration, and then just a couple examples of ones that I do like a lot also being made better. So this is a little bit of Bloom. Get to hear a little bit of them chastising Ed before. So stand over there. Stop pretending to tune your guitar. And these live sessions also, it should be said, this is where they do have the 2 drummers, Clive Dreamer as well as Phil. It should also be noted that second drummer, Clive Dreamer, also a bald man.
I was waiting for... Yeah, I winked at you earlier when I brought him up.
Oh,
and
yeah.
also a facial hair bald man.
Yeah. So it's a little bit like Phil's like, yeah, we can bring in another drummer. But he's got to be bald, hasn't he?
Which is not what happened when they brought in a new drummer for
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Tom's like, how about a handsome bloke? Did you know Tom
So-
skipped... Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, and just so I'm actually like watching here. Tom is playing. It looks like that what is a piano loop on the album is something that Tom's playing on. It looks like a Jaguar.
A Jaguar. What's Ed doing?
Ed's hitting those
Okay.
on
Does
the
Johnny...
Stratocaster, or is that Johnny? It's not.
It's got to be JG. That...
Look, I still think that this song like needs a little more time in the oven, but do you agree that this is much more interesting than what's on the album?
This is like seeing...
Oh, Johnny's playing... No, that is Ed. Johnny is playing a snare and a low tom.
Awesome.
So there's
this is
3
like seeing
percussionists
a
on this
jazz
track.
fusion band. I mean, I haven't been to a lot of jazz concerts, but seeing jazz music, and I like jazz a lot, but I'm talking about like jazz fusion, which is very difficult music to deconstruct and understand. It's a marvel to look at.
Yeah.
This is not that. I'm just saying I hear more of maybe the challenges that go into it, seeing them play it, right? And it's maybe a little bit more exciting.
Yeah, and again, I would say it really speaks to their ability to execute what they're trying to pull off with this album, because this is 6 musicians.
Yes.
3 of them playing percussion.
Mm-hmm.
And listen to how quiet and restrained it still is. So I don't think that they need to sacrifice that part of the
Right.
album. I think that's really part of what makes it distinct and interesting, but it just sounds cooler like this to me. And I also like
It's
am hearing more the tone of the sounds that are kind of that venom.
Yeah.
Dun-dun. To me, that's a really boring sound to build the song around in the album, but I can like hear the note of it when they're playing it on a guitar.
It's so interesting though, because like on the Eraser, we were marveling at that Tom retained a lot of the melodies on traditional instrumentation and then sort of digitized them, which is sort of what they did here. Far more challenging because you're dealing with a group of individuals instead of just one person making the music, right?
Yeah.
So it's impressive. I think they maybe expected it to hit a little bit more than it did with their audience.
Yeah. I mean, to me, this is now I'm like, I kind of like this song.
Yeah,
this is loads better to me.
I'm not saying that it hit with me like, oh, I could hear the traditional instrumentation. I've watched this before, so I can obviously. But I do think that's why I enjoy track one, Bloom, is because I imagine I'm trying to hear it as music, and it is music, but I'm trying to hear it in a more traditional sense when I listen to it, and therefore I'm trying to understand something that I don't hate, which automatically makes it this cool experience. Again, context.
Now, okay, I'm going to play a little bit of Morning Mr. Magpie. To me, there's no better case for the live approach being better than the one they used than this song. Listen to this. Johnny's hair is a mess. Tom's doing a little dance in his vest, even though he's warming up.
But it's a mess like Johnny Greenwood style. It's just flowing, right?
No, it's actually like sticking out all crazy.
Oh, funny.
Yeah.
Our partners that we brought to the Smile concert were very impressed with Johnny's hair flips, and I'd had about enough of it by the end of it. I'll tell you that much.
A little bit of a lusty atmosphere coming from the women folk.
His hair flips. Yeah, I mean, I'm getting bangers and mash vibes too.
Yes. And those offbeat hi-hat hits now sound really cool and interesting to me. Is where on the album they kind of drag the song a little bit.
Sure,
for me.
Do you know why I think I've always loved bangers and mash? Because I wouldn't say discovered it, but started really listening to it a lot. Was closer to the King of Limbs and after, is I do think that you could hear their desire to want to do this kind of music in that song a little bit.
Sure.
And then specifically in this one.
And we're not going to listen to the whole song, but let me fast forward to kind of, there's a part where it gets really cool. Yeah, right after this. So I'm just going to... And now it sounds like a Kid A song to me.
Yeah, big time.
Tom played an SG.
I love it.
Right here, check this out. And still, when it all kicks back in, still very restrained. We're not getting a bunch of cymbal crashes, We're not getting a guitar solo. It's a very tightly held down groove that they're working in.
But I love that I can
way
hear
cooler.
U2 so much in this song, one of the weirdest songs on the album. I hear the effects a little bit, and I just hear a lot of. And I'm not saying imitative. I'm not saying, but I just love that I can hear that in a Radiohead song this weird.
Now I'm just gonna play a little bit of Separator because this is one to me that is extremely close. Their live replication is extremely close to how it sounds on the album.
Yeah.
Because I don't have a single issue with the arrangement on the album, but you just still get. I think it's still a nice example of just how the human factor. Add something that gets a little bit lost in even the best songs on King of Limbs, in my opinion. Colin, by the way, is wearing a flannel tucked into his blue jeans, so he's like very dad core right now.
Well, he is the elder brother.
Oh, and that loop that we hear at the end is starting off the song here. And that's The Handsome Man, if I ever heard it.
Man, that's so cool.
It's extremely similar.
Yeah. Gosh, this gives me such All I Need vibes.
Tom is like really feeling himself.
Yeah.
He's kind of like pursing his lips while he's dancing a little bit.
He's wearing a ring too on his middle finger, which that's a big display of confidence.
So I just wanted to play this just to point out, even the ones that they don't change at all. It's just got a little bit extra juice on it.
Yeah.
I feel like, and so I don't know. I feel kind of vindicated with my take that the sampling approach detracts more than it adds. It's just my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think though that even the comparisons to, I mean, at any point, Walker, I think we compared it to this album to Hail to the Thief, Kid A, Amnesiac. I would say with the highest frequency, I invoked Hail to the Thief, or I'm sorry, I invoked Kid A and Amnesiac the most. And this is not a unique opinion, but I mean, I love watching the footage of them touring those Kid A and Amnesiac so much because they opened up so much. And again, I think Radiohead was maybe expecting that result from this album as well. Mm-hmm. Maybe Tom, honestly, Tom and Nigel the most. I don't think that they're one unified organism all the time. 5 different people. And I do think these songs opened up, just not to the same extent because they were maybe a little too contained at the outset, like you said. Mm-hmm. That's not my opinion, listeners, 100%. But I do think there's a lot of merit to when Walker stated that.
Can I play you 2 more things before we get out of here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, let's see. So this is a live version of Lotus Flower that Tom played at a benefit for Haiti. So this is an early form of it. Have you heard this?
Yeah.
Ah, darn it.
Because there was the Haiti earthquake in 2010.
January 2010. But you've heard the...
Man, but let's listen to it, though. I don't...
Well, I know, of course.
Oh, okay.
I told you off mic, I was like, I bet I'm going to play some stuff you haven't heard. This, to me, speaks to my theory that I've stated many times that... you write a great enough song and you can arrange it however the hell you want it. It's just going to still sound awesome because this is Lotus Flower played just solo on a guitar. Not the best quality recording, but...
No excited yet.
I love when Tom writes kind of bluesier, bassy riffs. Kind of I'm a Wicked Child vibes a little bit.
Very melodic bass line there.
I would slip myself into your pocket, invisible. Who are you want?
So good.
Isn't this a cool version of this?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think they made the right call with how they arranged it and stuff on the album, but it's just really cool that this song can live such different ways and work so well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just like the clock. Or not just like, but similar to the
exactly.
clock. Yeah.
And let's hear the chorus, I guess.
So good.
Empty space inside my one setting. I set you free. I set you free. There's an
Oh, God.
inside my heart where the weeks take root. So now I set you free. I set you free.
For Haiti.
Okay, this you haven't heard.
Okay.
I swear to God,
I'll
this is the
pretend I
last
haven't
thing I'm
even
going to
had.
play you. No, don't lie if you have heard it. Okay.
No, I won't.
So on tour, on the tour for the King of Limbs, they started playing some new songs, as Radiohead has always done. One was Identikit, a song which will appear on a Moonshaped Pool. One is a song that is still up to this point unreleased, not as a B-side, not on any album, but I figured it counted as supplemental King of Limbs material because it was written and first performed on that tour. It's called Cut a Hole. Do you know this song, Zach?
No.
Okay. This is a little bit of Cut a Hole, a song still unreleased. If they have a studio version of it, I'd love to hear it someday because I think that this is pretty cool.
Seems John Mayer is guesting. I'm just kidding.
I'm getting very From a Basement on the Hill vibes.
Very much so. Oh, yeah. Well, kind of John Lennon-y a little bit.
Yeah. Like creepy circus music.
Yeah,
almost.
Little Benefit of Mr. Kite.
Yeah.
God, I hear the Elliot in it too, though, dude.
Yeah, isn't it very Elliot-y?
Well, and just how many songs on From a Basement on a Hill close with these sort of moments, even on the bigger songs.
This is kind of the vein it continues in. It's not one that like it feels like something they were messing with.
Yeah.
Where it's like if they finished it, it would probably have like more parts and stuff.
Yeah.
But I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Man, I love that. And so there's no studio version? I can't download it? Okay.
Nope.
Oh, all right. Cool.
I'm hoping that they have cut a studio version and one day we'll get it on a box set or something because I think it's pretty cool. Dude, that's King of Limbs, and this is our longest episode for Radiohead's shortest album. But we just, I don't know, we just didn't think it was really one that we wanted to drag you through too on. I think we wanted to I think the best way to give this album its fair due
is to listen to us talk about it.
Well, I just definitely thought that it was like, this one warranted one hard look.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And I really hope that the fans of this album feel that it's been treated fairly today.
Yeah.
I know that I have had a lot to say about it that isn't all positive, but I really do just want to close on the note of like King of Limbs. Hell yeah. It's in the rotation now, and I was missing out. I was missing out all this time. I'll say it. What about you, Zach? Final thoughts?
No, I really like what you said, and I just would say, sometimes it's funny to say, why don't you like that? And you're like, because it sucks. But most of the time when you're dealing with artists that put in the amount of time and effort, like a Radiohead or whatever, I think it's okay to have issues if you can articulate them like, half as well as you did. So that's what's fun I think this podcast would be really boring if it was us just, even intelligently just saying why we loved every single thing. And we've done plenty of that too. But it is a nice, I'm not talking just about our episode, but it's a nice experience in comparison to In Rainbows. Mm-hmm. So I don't have much else to close with. I'm really, I found this immersion into it to be super, super rewarding and touching at moments, this half of Radiohead's catalog is so touching, and I'm not somebody who gets super moved by music. Sometimes music and movies in conjunction, they can bring up those feelings, but, maybe I'm just getting older and a little softer, but I also think too, it's the way what the artist is delivering. OK Computer, I fucking love, but I'm not moved by it in the same way.
Yeah.
So that's what I would close with.
That's really well said, man, because you are getting older and softer in your old age, but so is Radiohead. And I really enjoy the sentimentality of this latter third of their career.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that they would, even if they wrote a codex in the OK Computer era, I think that they would be like, no, that's too, that's a little too sweet.
Yeah.
And I like that they are getting a little more sentimental in their old age. And I really enjoy all flavors that they're bringing to us. And yeah, you're the king of laughs. I'm the king of love. And listeners, you are the kings of listening to this podcast. We couldn't do it without you. I mean, we could, but it wouldn't be fun.
No.
I would not continue to do this without you. I would just be like, I'll just talk to Zach on the phone about it. We don't need to record it. We don't need to drive to each other's houses to do that. But we love doing it because you're making it so fun, especially when you heartily agree or disagree with us. I mean that sincerely. All I've wanted is to have a podcast that people care enough that they feel upset when we don't have the same opinions as them. So sound off, let us know, and maybe let us know what the next horrible post on Reddit is that we can do, because I think we might need to go back to that well again. In the meantime, really looking forward to seeing you again next week, Zach. I know we'll have a lot to catch up about then. And thank you so much for listening. Tell your friends, tell the king of limbs in your life to get their limbs on this podcast. And we'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Idiotalk is a Glenn Brothers production. Get in touch with us at idiotalk.podcast@gmail.com or follow us on Instagram at idiotalk.podcast. And thanks for listening to